The Rise and Fall of Craftsman, the tool empire that lost its soul. There's a socket wrench sitting in a garage drawer somewhere in America right now. It's old. The chrome has dulled. The knurling on the handle is worn smooth from decades of use. But it still works. Perfectly. Exactly the way it did the day it was bought. Maybe 30 years ago. Maybe 40. Stamped right into the steel are two words. Craftsman. Made in USA. That wrench tells a story. Not just about tools, but about a brand that became part of the American identity, and what happens when that identity gets sold off piece by piece. To understand Craftsman, you have to understand Sears. Not the half-empty mall anchor store you might remember from the 2000s, but the Sears of the 20th century. A company so dominant, so deeply woven into American life, that it was practically a utility. Sears didn't just sell you things, it delivered civilization to your doorstep. Rural families ordered entire homes from the Sears catalog. Farmers bought their equipment through Sears. A generation of Americans furnished their kitchens, clothed their children, and built their futures around what Sears offered. And in 1927, Sears launched a tool line under a name that would become legendary: Craftsman. The name itself was deliberate. Not a person's name, not a corporate abbreviation, a statement: Craftsman. It spoke directly to the man who worked with his hands, the mechanic, the carpenter, the farmer, the factory worker who fixed things on weekends. It said, "These tools are for serious people doing serious work." From the very beginning, Craftsman set itself apart with one bold promise: a lifetime guarantee. You break it, you bring it back, no questions asked, no receipt required. Sears would replace it. Period. That guarantee was not a gimmick, it was a declaration of confidence. Sears was saying, "We believe in these tools so completely that we will stand behind them forever." And that trust, once built with American consumers, became almost unbreakable. Through the 1930s and 1940s, Craftsman grew quietly and steadily. The Great Depression didn't kill it. If anything, hard times made people more likely to repair things themselves rather than replace them. A good set of Craftsman tools was an investment. People who couldn't afford to hire a mechanic learned to change their own oil. Farmers who couldn't afford equipment downtime learned to fix their own machines. Craftsman was there for all of it. Then came the post-war boom, and everything accelerated. The 1950s and 1960s were the golden age of the American garage. Returning soldiers bought houses in the suburbs. Those houses had garages. Those garages became workshops. A generation of men, and it was mostly men, took enormous pride in what they could build and fix themselves. The DIY culture was not a hobby trend. It was a way of life. Craftsman rode that wave perfectly. Sears stores were everywhere. The catalog was in every home, and when a man walked into the tool aisle at Sears and picked up a Craftsman wrench, he felt the quality instantly: heavy, solid, balanced. These were not cheap tools. These were tools that felt like they meant business. Sears was also smart about manufacturing. They didn't make the tools themselves. They contracted out to American manufacturers, but they enforced strict quality standards. Companies like Isco, Armstrong, and later Danaher produced Craftsman hand tools to specifications that Sears controlled tightly. The result was consistent quality across the entire product line, year after year. By the 1970s, Craftsman was the best-selling tool brand in America, not one of the best, the best. Walk into any hardware store, any auto shop, any construction site, you would find Craftsman tools. They were everywhere because they deserved to be everywhere. The 1980s brought something new: aspiration. Craftsman wasn't just for working men anymore. The home improvement movement was taking off. Television shows were teaching middle-class homeowners how to renovate their own kitchens, build their own decks, tile their own bathrooms. And what did every one of those projects require? Tools. Craftsman became a status symbol of a particular kind, not flashy, not expensive for the sake of it, but the symbol of the competent homeowner, the person who knew how to do things. Having a full Craftsman toolbox in your garage said something about you. It said you were capable. Sears leaned into this. Their marketing was brilliant. The red toolbox became iconic. The socket set in its molded tray, every piece in its place, was almost beautiful in its precision. Craftsman gift sets for Father's Day became an American tradition. Generation after generation of fathers unwrapped Craftsman tools and felt genuinely pleased. And through all of this, the lifetime warranty held. Stories circulated, legends, almost, of men bringing in a wrench that was 50 years old and leaving with a brand new one. No argument, no fine print. Sears honored the promise. That built a loyalty so deep it was almost irrational. People didn't just prefer Craftsman, they were devoted to it. But underneath all that success, cracks were beginning to form. The first crack was the slow hollowing out of American manufacturing. Through the 1980s and especially the 1990s, the economics of production shifted. Labor costs overseas were a fraction of domestic costs. Competitors began offering tools made in Asia at prices that were hard to argue with, and pressure began building on Sears to cut costs. At first, the changes were subtle. A few product lines moved offshore. Quality control, once iron tight, became a little less consistent. The materials were a little different. The tolerances were a little looser. Most consumers didn't notice right away. Craftsman still had its reputation, and reputation carries enormous inertia. But the people who used these tools every day started to notice. Mechanics, contractors, the serious users who had trusted Craftsman for decades. They started talking. A wrench that used to feel indestructible now felt fine. Not bad, just not what it used to be. The second crack was the rise of competition. For most of Craftsman's history, its main competition at the professional level was Snap-on, an expensive, truck-delivered brand aimed at professional mechanics. But Craftsman and Snap-on weren't really competing for the same customer. Then came new players. Home Depot opened in 1978. Lowe's expanded aggressively through the 1980s and 1990s. These were not just new stores, they were new ecosystems. They stocked their own tool brands, offered their own warranties, and gave consumers options they'd never had before. Milwaukee, DeWalt, Ryobi, Husky. The tool landscape was suddenly crowded. Sears had built its empire on being the destination. When the destination had competition, the empire was vulnerable. The third crack was the deepest, and it was self-inflicted. Through the 1990s and into the 2000s, Sears made a series of decisions that, in hindsight, look almost suicidal. Rather than investing in stores, in quality, in the customer experience, Sears invested in financial engineering. The company focused on real estate deals, on mergers, on short-term profits. Kmart and Sears merged in 2005 under CEO Eddie Lampert, who many observed seemed to treat the company more like an investment portfolio than a retail business. Stores were allowed to deteriorate. Inventory management became erratic. Customer service declined. The experience of shopping at Sears, which had once felt like visiting an institution, began to feel like visiting something that was slowly being abandoned. And crucially, the commitment to craftsman quality continued to erode. More and more products were sourced from overseas suppliers with minimal oversight. The lifetime warranty was still there on paper, but the tools it was warranting were no longer the same tools. The name was the same, the quality was not. The professional trades largely abandoned Craftsman. Mechanics switched to Snap-on, Mac Tools, or Matco. Contractors moved to Milwaukee, DeWalt, and Makita. Craftsman became the brand for casual users, for the once-a-year DIY project, for garage sales. That wasn't nothing. There are still a lot of casual users, but it was a profound fall from what Craftsman had been. Then came 2017, and this is where the story takes a genuinely strange turn. Sears, hemorrhaging money, desperate for cash, sold the Craftsman brand to Stanley Black and Decker for nearly $1 billion. Think about that. A brand that Sears had owned for 90 years, a brand that had been central to the company's identity, was sold off like a piece of furniture from a house that was being foreclosed on. The sale was complicated. Sears retained the right to sell Craftsman tools in its own stores. Stanley Black and Decker gained the rights to manufacture and sell Craftsman everywhere else, and they moved fast. Within a year, Craftsman tools appeared at Lowe's, at Ace Hardware, at Walmart. Suddenly, the brand was everywhere it had never been, under new ownership, promising a return to American manufacturing. Stanley Black and Decker announced plans to produce some Craftsman tools in the United States. That was genuinely good news. New facilities, new jobs, an actual attempt to reconnect the brand with the heritage it had abandoned. The reception was mixed. Longtime Craftsman loyalists were cautiously optimistic but deeply skeptical. Could a brand whose identity had been so thoroughly tied to one retailer rebuild itself under new ownership? Could the quality actually return? And did it even matter in a world where the tools you could buy at any price point were dramatically better than anything available a generation ago? Here's the uncomfortable truth at the heart of this story. Craftsman's decline is not really a story about tools. It's a story about what happens when short-term financial decisions are made at the expense of long-term brand value. Sears had something extraordinary, a name that millions of Americans trusted with a depth and loyalty that money cannot easily buy. And they spent that trust down like a savings account, withdrawing from it year after year, never depositing anything back. The lifetime warranty was the soul of the Craftsman brand. It was a promise. And promises, once broken, even quietly, even gradually, even without any single dramatic moment, cannot easily be unbroken. The consumers who felt betrayed didn't write angry letters. They just stopped coming back. Stanley Black and Decker is trying. The new Craftsman tools have generally received decent reviews. Some of the hand tools are legitimately good. But here's the challenge. The new Craftsman exists in a market that is fundamentally different from the one that made the original Craftsman great. Today's consumer has access to professional-grade information. YouTube tutorials, Reddit forums, and tool review channels mean that anyone who wants to know the actual quality of any tool can find out in minutes. The mystique of a brand name no longer substitutes for actual performance. You cannot coast on a reputation you haven't earned recently, and the competition is extraordinary. Milwaukee Tool has dominated the professional trades. DeWalt remains a powerhouse. Snap-on still owns the high end. For the serious DIYer, there are more genuinely good choices than at any point in history. Where does that leave Craftsman? Somewhere in the middle. Decent quality, accessible prices, available everywhere. A familiar name that still means something to people of a certain age, even if it means something different to their children. That socket wrench in the garage drawer, though, the old one, the one that still works perfectly, that wrench represents something real. It represents a time when a company made a promise and kept it, when quality was not a marketing position but an actual standard, when the goal was to make something so good that it would last a lifetime, and then to stand behind that guarantee no matter what. That idea didn't belong only to Craftsman. It belonged to a whole approach to American manufacturing and American commerce. An approach that said, reputation is everything. The customer's trust is everything. Don't sacrifice it for a short-term gain, because once it's gone, you will spend a fortune trying to get it back, and you may never fully succeed. Craftsman isn't gone. The name survives. Some of the tools are good. There's a real chance that, under Stanley Black and Decker's stewardship, the brand builds back something meaningful. But the empire, the Sears empire, the American institution, the company that put tools in the hands of a nation and kept its promise for 9 decades, that's gone. You can find its ghost in garage sales, in estate auctions, in the inherited toolboxes of men who are no longer with us. Pick up one of those old wrenches. Feel the weight of it. Feel the chrome, the knurling, the solid click of a ratchet that was made to last. That's what Craftsman was, that's what it built, and that's what was lost when the accountant started making decisions that the craftsman never would have made.